is going to be the Kali Linux. So this is the Kali Linux is the most of the pen testing or people who are into hacking use this particular Linux services for very specific reason, right? So it provides, compared to any other Linux, this Linux comes with a lot of hacking related tools out there. And to be frank, it's about 700 plus tools that are there, right? It is not mandatory that you have to use Kali Linux. You can use any operating system of your choice. In fact, when I'm doing majority of my work is done on Windows itself, right? Because majority of my work revolves around documentation. When you pen test a particular network or application, we have to document it. How did we go about it? And then, so Microsoft Word is the most commonly used tool, but it is right, but it is not the one that is used for pen testing. There are a lot of other things. We'll see one of those tools today that we're going to use. From a practice perspective, I will be using one particular machine called BBox. This is a vulnerable machine by design. Okay. So this machine is used by us to gain access or to compromise or to practice how to do hacking and other stuffs, right? And also maybe I will also be using one more website called Altera Mutual or testfire.net in case if it's required by us, and we'll talk about that process, right? So that is what we are going to see. I'm also going to introduce about few other tools when we come into play. Again, for SSH session, we will be looking at an Ubuntu virtual machine as well, right? And you could see here, I'm running all the three devices or the operating systems out here on a virtual box, on a VMware workstation in a virtual environment. We're not, when it comes to training and pen testing, we don't rely on cloud-based products because it is not ideal. And it is, you need to have a lot of permissions before you could go ahead with using pen testing in cloud services, right? So it's not a good idea. So we are avoiding it. So all the things that is happening, it's happening in my system in a very controlled environment, right? So be very careful. Even pinging sometimes it can be illegal for certain website in certain countries without the knowledge, from the approval from the particular client that the server goes to, right? So that is the criteria out here. Okay. So now let's come back, right? So we'll talk about, right, session attacks today, right? The session attacks, what is that and how your username and password is of less importance to the hacker and more than your session cookies are going to be used on them, right? Before we go further, I like to ask, how many of you know what is a cookie, right? So I'm not talking about biscuit or something which is baked, right? From a session perspective or even a web application perspective, what is a cookie? So cookie is a small data that is stored by the website that you're visiting out, right? It stores some kind of a data in many ways. For instance, let's say you're logged into Amazon, right? And when you come back and close the browser, and probably after you left a couple of days, you come back and you will see, right? You will see the components that is more relevant to you, or you can also see the previously browsed products out there, even when you're not logged into that. And even when you're logged into that, how does this machine, this data gets tracked, right? And certain times, let's say when you close a particular PDF, you're reading a particular PDF in your browser, and then you close the browser and then you open it. Instead of starting that PDF from that exactly the top of it, it will start from where you stopped. How does browser know this in kind of an information? Or in cases, how does the server that is connecting to you know about this kind of an information, right? So this plays in a very important role. And this is where the cookies are going to be introduced. So cookies is going to store that information and that is going to be presented with that part, right? So for instance, let's say, let me share a particular See here. So one of the places that you will see here is that when you open any kind of a web page, can you guys see my screen?
No, I was about to ask.
Okay, so 1 second. So very different. So I'm using one more extra monitor, so I will not be able to maximize my PPTs today and try to reduce this. Probably this is a better way, right? So for instance, where is this cookie stored and what is this information stored, right? So for instance, when I'm opening Amazon.com, I'm not logged into this particular website. You can see it is asking me to sign in, but you will see what I'm getting over here may not be what others are going to be getting. I'm getting more about computers, more about, IT and other things related to that, and things for others, it may be completely different. How does this Amazon know about this and where it is getting this information, right? If you right click on your browser, you will get a lot of options. When you click on inspect queue, you will get a lot of things out there, right? Here, I'm not really worried about a lot of things, all these other things. For the current session, what we're going to be there. So when you click on the storage out here, right, and you can see the left side, there is cookies here, right? And you can see there's a lot of things out here, right? These are nothing but your cookies that is storing some kind of an information out there. So there's a lot of analytics is happening out there. It is collecting information. Amazon collects a lot of information. Amazon, Google, Facebook collects a lot of information. They know what browser you're browsing from. They know what is your screen size. They know what keyboard you're using. They know whether you're connecting from a laptop, keyboard, more desktop or a mobile. And they will even know what kind of an hardware you're running, right? All those things are information are collected by these cookies and sent and exchanged with the server out there, right? So this is what basically a cookie does. But my question is, how is this going to be relevant for me, right? They are collecting information, how it is going to relevant for me. Out of all these cookies, there is a very one important cookie, and this important cookie is called as a session cookie, right? A small piece of data stored on the client side used to maintain user sessions in a web application. So to remember user state, whether the user is logged in or not, and also is going to enable you to have a better experience, right? So my question is, so for instance, what do you mean from this? Let's say, let me, what is connect to this particular machine out here. Okay. I will know what is the IP address of this particular machine. When I give ifconfig, I will get. So it is 192.168.178.128. Okay. Let me open my browser on my Kali Linux out there. 192.170. Right. And you can see this is a particular web page that I'm going to log in out there. And here I've got a very particular add-on called cookie editor. Okay. Cookie editor that is going to be used out there. Whenever I log into this website, this cookie is going to be sent to me. Okay. So for instance, I'm going to use one more tool here, right, called burp. This is a proxy tool which is going to intercept all the traffic whenever I click any button. The information goes from server, client to the server that can be intercepted out here. All right. So when I'm sending a request here from this browser, it is actually going from this machine to this particular machine. Okay. So now I'm going to use debug, and it allows in the burp flow to capture the request that is being sent. Right. So now let's see. Okay, it's did not do it. Let me log out. Okay. Let me increase the font size. So that you can read the data. So I'm logging in here. See, this is the request that is actual request, a bit by bit request that is sent from your browser to the server, right? In this case, when we're talking about client, we're talking about the browser here. So you could see there's a lot of information. It is telling connect this page and it has to connect to the server. The server IP address is where usually we'll get the domain name like google.com or facebook.com, that's going to be there. It is also giving out a lot of information like Firefox browser and things and other information that is going to be given out here. And you can see here the username and password that is going to be sent out, right? So when I forward this, when this information goes to the server, server is going to respond me back with a session ID. All right, if you see at the cookie editor, this is given a session ID of PHP session ID. If you see, go to inspect element out here, see the storage, see the cookie, you're getting two cookies out here, right? One is the security level, which we are setting up here. And this is the session cookie, right? This is the session cookie. How do we know this is the session cookie? Let's say if I'm requesting intercept, sending some kind of a request. Let's say I want to open this particular page. When I click on hack and see this is the session cookie is being sent out there. So if I remove the session cookie and send, this is no longer going to work for me. Okay, this is no longer going to work for me because it has been problem is occurred out. Okay. So now we have what is this? We'll talk about it and why it is important to understand what is a session. I'm just giving an example here. I'm not explaining it yet. What is a session cookie? I'm going to talk about it. And this cookie is going to be used by us for session management. So what is a session here? A session is nothing but when you log in, you're going to be assigned a session, right? That you are a user for the website, for the application. Until you log out, you're going to be managed by the web server or the service, and what you can access and how long, what you can update, delete and things, what are the requests is made by you will be satisfied by the web server, right? So now let's understand few things before let's understand session cookie in a much more deeper way. Right. So now let's say my first question is your web services will run on a protocol called HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And this protocol, the problem with this protocol is it's stateless. So meaning when two requests are sent in a particular order, request number 1, 2 and 3, the server which is running on port number 80 is actually running a HTTP. And when it receives this, it does not know the sequence. It does not understand the sequence. It thinks all are independent request. Okay. This is exceptionally good when you're working with a static web page and you don't have to manage everything. State is not going to be there. But think about when you enter username and password, okay, and this authenticates. You're requesting, let's say it is telling, open my profile page, show my profile details out here in that particular page is happening out there. And it will see this, it will take this information and it will process it, and you see the user and password is given. It will cross check, both of them are matching, then it will give a response, right? In the second time, when I'm requesting for, let's say I'm going for, something, there could be a tab called sales or in something information out there. When I want to request for the same thing, this time the request is going to be rejected. The main reason for that is there is no username and password with the request. Okay, there is no username and password with the request because since HTTP is stateless, it does not know that this is what is happening out here. That is the second request coming for that, and user has already sent his username and password. I should not ask for that, and this is not going to work out here. So every time we are supposed to send your username and password to the server. My question to you guys is, how many times do you enter any website you're opening out there? How many times do you enter your username and password? Correct? And predominantly only once, right? Not more than that. And unless until you clicked on logout, the usual application is going to ask you for a username and password only once. But does your request, every time you're making a new request, why is that they are not being prompted for password, right? So you can tell Karthik, every request you're telling that password should be sent, but here you're not sending any password in the second request, right? When I'm sending the application, when I'm refreshing the page, I'm not sending my username and password. So what is happening out here, right? This was a very particular problem that they faced, right? First of all, HTTP is a very old protocol. It is being designed when security was not a concern, right? It was just a technology people for sending data. And initially, most of the time you see only static pages, right? A word pages, nothing, no diagram or anything. That is how the internet started. World Wide Web, that is how it started. Very basic page, nothing information. Then people started adding background color, font color, and then wanted images and things. It kept on evolving out there. But the protocol, underlying protocol remains the same. It is a very old protocol and does not, it is, they have not updated to it, and they don't feel the need as well. But again, question is, why is that username password is not sent from us, but you are telling every time we need to authenticate. And this is very true. Every request sent need to be authenticated. Okay. So, but you might be asking, okay, how it is going to happen out there, right? How it is going to happen out there. And this is where your session cookies is going to play a very important role, right? Let's have a look at it from a diagrammatic perspective, right? So is here a user logs in, server generates a session ID is stored in a cookie, and the client sends the cookie with the subsequent request. And user authentication and session management is going to happen out here. Okay. So what exactly I'm going to talk about here? What exactly is happening out here? So see here, let me extend this, right? So what is happening here is that when I first open the page in this request, what is happening is that I'm sending the username and password out here. What the server does is that it will check in the database because your username and password is stored where? It is going to be stored in some database. This is the particular user, this is the password that is going to be there. It is going to fetch that record from here and it is going to compare the username and password that you have entered out there. And they're going to combine, check both of them. If both of them are same, that means user authentication is successful and the user what he is telling is a right user, right? So now what it is going to do is that the server is going to generate a session ID. Session ID is nothing but what we saw in my Kali Linux, right? When we see here cookie editor, This is our session ID. This is a random long string that is going to be generated by the server and sent to the client, telling that this is the session ID you're supposed to be using out there for any subsequent request, right? So now what is going to happen is that whenever the server wants to connect and request some kind of a resource from the server, sorry, whenever the client wants to connect and request some kind of a resource from the server, it is going to tell request telling that I want to access and dash, meaning which of the utility or service it wants to do. Along with that, it is going to assign a session cookie, meaning it is going to give the same session cookie. Here, let's assume if the session cookie is given 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's very small, but for explanation, I'm telling that if they're given the session ID 1, 2, 3, 4 out here, what it is going to do is that it is going to send in the subsequent request 1, 2, 3, 4 to the server. Okay. So now what is going to happen? When I will get the request 1, 2, 3, 4, again the server is going to go to the database. It will check whether this session token 1, 2, 3, 4 is a valid token or not. Right? It is going to check whether the token is valid token or not. In the background, server is maintaining a lot of things. It is telling this token belongs to Karthik, right? And the Karthik is the admin user, and you will have all the privileges out there, right? Let's say there's one more tokens for someone called Anil, right? And Anil token is 4567. So the information there will still is a normal user, only access to his own profile, and his profile ID is, you know, FG1AX. That is just some random profile ID is going to be given out there. He can't access anything, whereas the session ID that belongs to Karthik can access anything. So now it knows that this is the session ID. It is cross-checking here what are the session ID, what is the whether it's a valid session ID, it belongs to which user or not. Remember, the request was asking for a particular resource. So here it could be some kind of an PDF file or it could be some kind of an information. Here this is going to check, the server is going to check whether this token has permission to access this information or not. If it does not have access to this information, it will send back a reject message or unauthorized message out there. But since it is matching out here, I'm going to give it access to that particular PDF file and the user will be able to show it, right? So this is how a typically session is going to happen. And this is how we prevent from entering username and password every request that is being sent out there, right? This plays a very important role, right? This plays a very important role in real time because it is very difficult for user to let's say you're opening your Gmail account, right? Every time you're pressing a refresh to check whether a new mail has come or not, how would you feel entering your username and password again and again, right? It becomes very difficult, very cumbersome. Probably you will not use the application at all, telling that once in a day I'll check my mail and after that I'm not going to do that. Right? It has a lot of other disadvantages from a security perspective, meaning every request I'm sending my username and password. Again, if one of the session is broken, my password is also broken, right? And that is it's we don't want to have those kind of features. The session ID is also not simple, right? There are a lot of things that need to be followed when I'm giving a session ID, right? That we will look into that from a different perspective. But typically, whenever we see, this is how it is going to happen. There are multiple ways of doing about that, and predominantly there are new technologies coming out there which are doing a lot of things in a different way. They're still session ID, but this is a traditional ID. About 70 to 80% of still websites use this, right, to manage user information out there. Correct. So now you might ask me, what happens, Karthik, to the session ID when the user logs out? right? When the user logs out, what happens out there? This session ID is supposed to be invalidated, right? I should not be able to access the request again and again on that. So before going to understand what is this going to happen, let's try to look from a practical way what is happening in every request that is being sent out, right? If you remember this, my previous, right? In a previous way, I entered my username and password, right? This is the request that was sent from me. Okay. Burp suite collects a lot of information about whatever the browser has been interacting with. All the information is going to be stored. And see here, the first request that was sent from me is containing the username and password in this scenario, right? That is what is going to happen out there. But any subsequent request, if you see, right, there is no session ID. Sorry, username and password is not there. There is only session ID. In this case, PHP session ID. If you actually see here, right, I'm sending a request to this. I'm sending the username and password. The right side, what you're seeing, this is the actual code that is being sent from the server to the client. And you will see the server is sending a PHP session ID back. Just like we are seeing here, the right, just like we are seeing here, the session ID is being PHP session cookie is sent back, and we are seeing in real time that it is sent back out there. And any subsequent request, it is going to be the same thing. Let's have a look into that. Let me copy this. Let me open a text editor. Right. Let me paste it here, and this is the session ID, right? And the any subsequent you can see, I'm copying from the left side the request being sent. This is going to be sent out, right? This particular session ID is going to be sent every time I'm sending a request, right? Let's say if even if I'm doing a refresh after refresh after refresh after refresh, every time I'm refreshing this page, this session ID is going to the server, and that is how it is going to be done on them, right? So this is how a typically session works. And let's say when I log out of the session, right? When I log out of the session, it is say, are you sure you want to leave? I'll tell, okay, leave it, right? So now you can see here, when I'm trying to enter a new request here, right? I'm sending the same session ID, but here I'm not getting it is moving me back to the login pages, right? What is happening here is that this session ID is no longer valid. This session ID is no longer valid. And every time you log out and log in, every time you log out and log in, the older session ID is going to be expired. That should no longer be available out there. See, now I logged out and logged in. If you see, the session ID is actually changed, right? Compared to the previous session ID, you can see here, the old session ID is not there. You have got a new session ID. Why? Because I logged out and logged in again. And this is very important. If this is not working, it is a vulnerability. If it's not changing, not there. One more beauty about BWAP is that burp suite is that I can make modifications to the request that is being sent out. Right. Let me come back to interception on. So let me resend the request. This is a fresh request. I've already logged in. I'm going to capture it here. So now just to make sure what I'm telling about session code cookie invalidation, I'm going to paste the older session with the newer session with the older session cookie where I've made modification here. And let's see if the older cookie is still valid at the server end, right? So it is asking me twice, and I'm going to rechange it, forward it again. And when I come back here, you see, it logged me out completely. It is telling that the cookie is no longer valid. You can't use it anymore. You can't use it to log in out there. So what is happening out there here is that if you remember here, we were storing the cookie information here, right? We told 1, 2, 3, 4 was used, and this is getting a lot of information, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 belongs to user Karthik, and it is telling what permissions that Karthik is having. That information, everything is going to be there. As soon as you press log out, the server is going to come back here and delete all this information from that cookie, and it will mark it as invalidated. Okay, this will mark it as invalidated. And session cookies cannot be used more than once. It is a one-time usage only, meaning it should never be used at all. Okay, never be reused, whatever it is in the entire lifetime. Even after 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it should never be reused. That is the condition for that session cookie out there, right? So now let's see. Okay, this is happening, right? A lot of things are there. The cookie, what are the characteristics? It should have be temporarily, meaning after some time the cookie should expire. That is why you see you might have logged into a certain website, unlike Gmail, certain website will automatically log you out. That is how it is going to do that, because cookie is going to expire, and secure flag and HTTP flag is there. So here it is going to make sure the communication, the cookie is being exchanged between the client and the server only when the communication line here is encrypted, meaning that it is running on HTTPS out there, right? There's a lot of technology that is going to be there. That's part of the fundamentals of cybersecurity. We go in, right? So I will not be able to push everything in here, but just say is that HTTPS encrypted, meaning when you open any website, right? When you open any website, you might see, right, a padlock symbol out here. You can see here, and you can see HTTPS. It means all the communication, in this case, between the Amazon and my browser, it is going to be encrypted and no one will be able to access it. That's the scenario part of it. Okay. So that is how it is going to work. So you might ask, okay, you've told these are the process that is happening out there. Why is that I'm learning here? What is that I'm going to use it out here? Why we are learning here is that today when we go to WAS top 10, WAS top 10 is an international standard for web application security, and they also rate top vulnerabilities in the, usually for every 2 to 3 years, depending on the whatever the data they could see, thousands of websites being hacked. Then they will study those attacks, what has happened, and they'll give a rating on which attacks are more vulnerable and which are top priority that we have to fix. According to them, session hijacking is a major vulnerability. So meaning, what I have to understand one more thing is that if you remember, if someone, let's say there's a user here, let's say we'll call it as Adam, and Adam has a username and password, right? But whenever he connects to the server, he gets a session ID in return. Okay. If someone can steal this session ID, if someone can steal this session ID, they will be able to communicate as Adam, and they will be able to have all access that belongs to Adam out there. Okay. I can log into the application as a different user out there. That is the advantage of having a session cookies. That is very much important. You know, a so it is not only that it is important for me to protect my username and password. I can protect my. I have to protect my session ID also. It is more important from my perspective. For me, whenever I'm pen testing, for me username and passwords are less important for me. For me, which is more important is the session ID. If I can leak the user session ID, it is very important. It's a very critical thing. and I want to, that's the main goal that I've always approached whenever we are going after a pen test out there. So now I told here these two communication are encrypted, right? And how do the hacker get access to this session ID? Whenever the hacker gets access to this session ID, and that is why it's called session hijacking, meaning what is going to happen is that the hacker is going to get this session ID and then he'll start using that session ID with the browser out there. Okay. And that is what it is going to deal with. In a simple example, I'll tell you, let's say, let's try to log into one more web page called testfire.net. Let me not intercept the request here. Okay. I'm going to be logging here as admin and admin. Okay. I've logged in here as this is also one more web page. It is designed to be vulnerable by default. Okay. And that is going to be there. I'm going to use edit user functionality. And this functionality you can see here, since he's an admin user, he can add new users to the system out here. And that's the main advantage of having out here. So now think about, what if someone gain access to his session ID? Can they log into his account? That is the criteria that we have to know about this. So one way of doing that is we need to have one more website or one more system from where we have to access, or we can start one more private window, that is the incognito window. So when I open the website here again, testfire.net, you will see that it is not logged in because these are two different session completely. Okay, there are two different sessions. I'm logged in as admin user here, and here I'm not logged in as at all. So let me talk about, I'm not going to log in as admin. I'm going to log in as simple user jsmith, and I'm going to enter his password. Okay, correct. So now let's say this is the admin user. Somehow, in this case, I'm copying it, but hacker might get many different ways of doing it. He will get access to the session ID of one user. Okay. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to come to the JSmith user and I'm going to change his session ID. Right. How do we do this? This can be done multiple way. Either I can do it in the cookie editor, but in my case, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to do intercept and I'm going to do a refresh out here. Right. And you can see the session ID is here. This is the session ID that is supposed to go. Right. I'm going to paste the new session ID here. That is the admin session ID, right? And then I'm going to forward it, right? And you will see now both the sessions are belonging to them, admin user only. Why? This session ID got overtaken. Admin session ID was hijacked. A normal user has escalated himself to a admin user out here. And now you'll see actually that normal user can see the incognito mode, private browsing, which we logged in as JSmith, is able to access admin privileges. Right? That is the reason why it is important to manage your sessions. Right? Session ID is very important. Hence, one of the reasons why you should never let your browser, right? You may think, okay, browser is open. I don't have, there is no username and password cannot be known to someone who is sitting right next to me. So I can leave my system unlocked, rather than locking your Windows desktop and going out, probably leave it out there. All they have to do is right click, inspect element, go to storage, and then they will get the session ID. And all they have to do is that copy and paste and start their own session. And they will be able to completely do everything that you're going to do on, right? And especially if this is the attack, the meaning the impact is going to be very, very high if something like this happens for an admin user, right? Think about something like this happens for an manager user out there. Manager has a lot of power. Any organization, he can approve, right? He can approve a lot of stuff. What if that is going to vary, right? That can be completely compromised out there. In lot of times, it is been done for an administrator for an operations team, and they've actually compromised the server, crashed the server, deleted the data, and everything. It's very scary, right? There are times where a company was existing on Friday, on Monday it did not exist because someone got into their system, compromised the session of the admin user, deleted each and every data, all the client information, all their transaction information, everything was deleted. Since it was an admin user, even their backup was compromised, right? They didn't have a separate, hard drive, which is located off site. Unfortunately, they lost everything, right? And this happens a lot. We don't see this kind of an attacks on the paper or in the news. One of the main reasons is that they don't want people to panic and not invest in technology, right? It will take more convincing for people to invest in IT or move their infrastructure from paper to digital, right? So this is the reason. So you don't see 99.9% of the attacks we don't see. Only 0.1% we see the attacks on the newspaper. And banks gets hacked all the time. Banks have a what do you call it, a government approval that they don't have to disclose their hacks to the customer. Mainly because if people know that their bank got hacked, they will take out the money, and so that is not a good sign, right? So that's why they prevent that from happening. So now we understand here that someone gain access to your session ID, they can compromise, right? They will be able to go into that and they will be able to get a lot of information out of it. But you may be telling Karthik, what you did here was very simple. You went to the cookie editor or you capture the traffic out here and there you got it, right? That is very easy. You have access to everything. So you're able to get that and show that, right? Yes, very true, right? I was doing that to showcase what is the impact of if your session ID gets stolen out there. But how does an hacker gain access to this, right? What is gain access to sessions, right? So one of the main things that we see is cross-site scripting, right? Cross-site scripting, when we talk about, right, when we talk about code, there are technically two types of code that you can take into consideration. One is the server-side code and one is the client-side code. JavaScript is one of those code that runs on your browser, okay? And it does a lot of things, right? Before we I could until explain about XSS attack, I'm talking about this. For instance, let's say why there's a client-side code is for a lot of reasons. Let's say if I want to do 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, there's a browser, right? I'm entering the 2 plus 2 equals to a button I'm going to click. I'm going to get 4 out here. But in a traditional sense, this information to and what operation that need to perform need to be sent to the server, and the calculation is going to happen here and the response is going to be sent back. Okay, this is totally fine, right? 2 plus 2 is going to be very little and the server can do it in a very instance, in a microsecond it can do it on that. But this is not the same if a billion people are sending this request, a billion people are trying to request what is happening on that. Then time, the cost of running the server is going to be very high. This makes it very difficult. To overcome this kind of a situation, what we get is we get the JavaScript. So what is going to happen in JavaScript is that when the system connects to the server for the first time, it is going to send a JS code out here, which will do the calculations for, right? When I give 2 plus 2, instead of sending to the server, it will not go to the server. It will send to the JS code on the browser itself, and the browser is going to calculate and display the data then and there itself, right? It is not going to go on the to and fro. Okay, and this is what is called a JS. I'm just giving an example here. 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. There's a lot of things that is going to happen done by the JS. Very, very powerful. Client side programming in today's time, it is very, very complex and very lot of things can be done out there. Uh, if you see, if you're playing any games on Facebook, right, in the games arena, I think if you have played about something like Farm Village or things like that, that is not actually, you're not running that code on the browser. It is on the server. It is running on the browser itself, right? That is how it is powerful. You can play games, you can do a lot of activities and things like that, right? So one more advantage is that I don't have to keep on sending my HTML page up and down every time, and it is going to automatically going to do a lot of activities, right? Especially for in some cases, if you go something like, you see any game that is happening out there, any sports games, live scores that is happening out here, when you see this game, right, every ball that is going to happen, it keeps on adding out here. There is a particular font is been done. It is showing a particular icon on this here for what run that has been taken out there. Things, all of this is going to be taken care by your JavaScript itself. Your server is going to just send a message telling new ball was bold and this is what is there, and that information is going to be taken care of, right? So that is what is going to happen. So it is a very powerful tool. Now let's understand, but this powerful tool also has a nasty behavior. If we are not careful, this can be used to perform a lot of attacks, right? A lot of attacks that is going to be there. JS is so powerful. In one instance, what happened was someone wrote a code in JS, right? Someone wrote a code in JS. It actually acts as a keylogger. Meaning as soon as they open the browser, anything they typed in their browser was getting keylogged and sent to a different person somewhere else out there. Right? That is what good capable is that, right? And it will be very, very difficult to manage. For instance, let's say a good programmer will be able to do this activity. Right? Let's say we'll see XSS attack, or in this case, a stored blog attack out here. Right? Let me research. Just think this is just like a normal blog, what you would do in something like an Instagram or Facebook. You're putting, someone has posted a thing and you start commenting or thing. That is how this is going to be there. So like if I put something like hi and submit, and this is going to open up. The thing about this particular process is that anyone opening this page will be able to see the message that is being sent by me, right? Everyone, just like when you comment on your someone's Insta post, that you can see the message what are the other people have done it on, right? What if I put up a very malicious code out here, right? In this case, I'm doing nothing much serious. I'm just using a small code to dump the session ID out, right? To dump the session ID, what I'm doing is alert document dot cookie, right? Close it here. And this is how I test whether session co-hijacking is vulnerable possibility or not. And now I'm going to give hi everyone, right? And I'm going to submit. Okay. And now you could see here, this is actually giving a pop-up and it is actually giving me the session ID that belongs to this particular user, right? Click on OK. And you see here, the message got posted and the session ID is getting displayed out here. Let me show you. This is the session ID I got from the attack. Is this the same session ID that is there in the system as well? Let me go to cookie editor, capture it here, right? You see, it is exactly the same, right? So I can write a very complex code out here. What can it be done is that what an hacker way. I'm not going to show the code out here, but I'm going to explain what could happen on them, right? A hacker is going to set up a server. In this case, usually they use a stolen credit card to create an AWS instance and they will listen, right? What is that they're going to listen? What they'll do is that they'll put up something like a blog, someone's blog, which is going to be there, and they're going to put a code here. And this code is not just a small line that we put out there. It could be, many pages of code. What this code is going to do is that every user opens this post, right? Their session ID is taken and sent to hacker, meaning he is going to take it and give it out there. And now anyone, he can choose whose session ID he can choose to open and check it out of there. And this is going to be done in a very large scale. Think about here, it is a very small page. It may be 10 users are going to be there. What if it is an Instagram post? Instagram post where a million users, right? Million users are actually commenting or opening that post and seeing what is happening. Instagram is safe. You don't have to worry about that. They take a lot of precautions so that malicious code cannot be executed on their website. But this, think about if that was not the case. Think about that was not the case. Millions of users' session ID can be compromised. I can choose who's to use and how to go about it. So that is how difficult this is going to be, right? I can use my XSS attack to gain access to any user out there. All they have to do, the victim mission, all they have to do is come and open this page and they will be hacked out there, right? For instance, let me open the same page from my Windows machine, right? I can, let me log in here. When I go to the same page, log, right? You see here, I also any machine. Here in this case, it may be same machine, but is a different instance. Anyone is accessing this page will be hacked. Their session ID is going to be taken out of the context and given to the hacker out there, right? This is how the session XSS attack can be taken into that, right? So here we are not going much more deeper into the XSS attack. In the main course, we go much more detailed. We'll see which are the different stages. There's actually, you could see here, there is something called as a reflected cross-site scripting and stored here. There are many variations of XSS attack that is discussed in the main course. But here, since we're only focusing on session ID, we are seeing how a session ID can be compromised. And one way is that way, right? So second way, how do we compromise a session ID? One is XSS attack, right? As we could see here, what is going to do? An attacker injects scripts into the server. A victim authentication, authenticates on the server. Server returns paste code with the injected script. Whatever the client is going to get the web page which has been modified by the hacker out there. What is going to happen here is that the victim machine now, after executing that code, will send its session cookie to the attacker, and now the attacker will be able to hijack the user session cookie, and because you'll be able to gain access into that part. And this is the most common thing that we see today. The main reason for this is happening is because the website are not designed carefully. Lot of design compromises happened out there. If they have taken necessary precautions, it would have been mitigated, right? If you see, for the attack, I gave a very particular script, right? Very particular pattern out here. Something like script. Then again, I closed something like script, right? If you see, these are all special characters, right? These are all special characters. Why is that in a text field, a special characters is allowed? It should not be allowed. If they had prevented, if I got an error telling it invalid input, right? I would never have been able to enter this and never the attack would have taken place and the session would have not been compromised at all. That is all. There are multiple ways we can prevent this, and one of the ways is going to be is this particular path, right? If you remember, nowadays you don't see much because there are additional security features there. In some time, if you go a couple of years back, whenever you are entering address in some web page, you want to enter using symbols like underscore, dash, plus or minus, delta, we can't use these symbols out there. And still some pages will not allow for that. The main reason is that they were actually mitigating the SQL XSS attack out there, preventing any special character being part of the input. Right? Even in email also, only special character that was allowed was at symbol. Right? But there are additional things that comes into play. Nowadays we can look into that part. That is there. Okay. So what is the second, you know, way of attacking? The second way of attacking is session side jacking, right? Uh, for this to understand, we need to understand what is the difference between an HTTPS and an HTTP protocol, right? An HTTP is a plain text, whereas HTTPS is secure. Meaning, in whenever you have some communication is happening over HTTP, if someone is listening, right? Someone is listening to the traffic, they can read the data easily out there. And that is how simple it is going to be. Okay. If someone is sniffing, that's going to happen out there. For instance, for an example perspective, right? I am going to show you, I'm going to use a very important tool called Wireshark, right? This particular tool is used for capturing the network traffic. It is not like your burp suit. This captures every traffic in a most detailed way. Burp suit captures only layer 7 data, meaning only HTTP data. This captures all other protocol, TCP, UDP, IP protocol, and everything out there. So here, let me log out of this, click OK, right? And you will see here, I'm going to use the HTTPS connection. I'm going to use HTTP :/, right? So you can see here, if you know, how do you know this is an HTTP? When you can see the padlock symbol here is actually, right? Padlock symbol here actually getting a red strike here, telling that this application is not secure. You have to go on your own, right? It's your risk if you're accepting out there. Also, if you, when you click on it, you can also see connection is not secure. The connection site information submitted will be reviewed by other users, like password message and everything. It's not happening on that. Okay. So now, because let me enter my username and password, B bug, and Let me recapture it. Right. I'm going to submit it. That information is sent. I'm going to stop it here. Right. Let me actually have to look into that. Right. Where is HTTP? In a short span of time, so much information is exchanged. See, you can see login is B, password is bug that is being sent out there. You can see the data that is being captured. And you see this is what is happening out there. But if you capture the same data, let me log out of the application here. And this time what I'm going to do is that instead of using HTTP, I'm going to use HTTPS colon slash slash. Press enter. Don't worry about this error message. For this application is totally fine. You can see the padlock red symbol is no longer out there and you're getting a proper padlock out here. Let me resend the data B bug. Let me stop it. Now you see there is no HTTP because everything is going via HTTPS. And when you come here, it is going to tell that I cannot read the data because the data is going to be encrypted. You cannot see the data. If you take any TLS application data, I cannot read the data. It is telling encrypted application data. I cannot read this information. It is telling protocol that is used is HTTP only, but the data cannot be read. When I'm go sending over HTTPS, that cannot be read out there. But what happens is that a lot of applications they may do a misconfiguration out there. Just like in this application, the entire application was accessible via HTTPS as well as HTTP that happens out there. And very recently we saw a similar interaction where the data was being sent in a very plain text. It is not only your username and password is going to be sent in plain text, every information that is being sent is going to be happening via plain text itself. That is why you have to be very careful when you're setting up. Always make sure that padlock symbol is always there when you're communicating. It means no one is able to listen to your data, right? It is very simple. It's not that difficult, right? It happens in real time. Probably someone is sniffing your network traffic will be able to look into that. What is happening out there? And in fact, uh, anyone who is sniffing your data will be able to tell which protocol you're using, which websites you're visiting, right? They may not know exactly how many times you visited, but they will know which websites you're using because there's one protocol called DNS that does not go over encryption, and that information still can be given out there. Your username and password is not going to be compromised, but I can tell which website you have been visiting, right? And if you're thinking, okay, if I browse something in incognito mode, no one will know about it, nothing like that. It is just that it does not store your history. Whatever you browse here, it will not be stored in your browser history, but your ISP provider will know what are the website that you've been browsing out there. Okay. And everyone will know. And if you want to not be tracked in any way, then only way you can do is using the Tor browser out there. Right? Any questions till now? I think we have seen a lot of things here, but any questions? Is the
Guys, if you have any question, feel free to ask. because this is a not a every day you will have this kind of opportunity to talk with someone industrial pioneers. So we are lucky enough to have Mr. Karthik with us. So feel free to, if you have any doubt, any question regarding cybersecurity, job related, market related, whatever, we can guide you.
Yes, this is a very important topic, right? Whenever you're going for an interview, anything related to cybersecurity, there's a very good chance this question is going to be asked, right? And depends on how we are going to respond to this particular question, how the rest of the interviews are going to happen, right? Especially me, when I'm conducting interview for any roles, I would definitely go with two of the questions. One is XSS and one is session part. If they can't answer it, explain it properly, I will stop the interview immediately and tell that candidate, we will not be able to go with you and things like that. Mainly because if someone can't understand a session, they will not be able to do any kind of an attack. Right? So that's important.
And
The-
the main agenda, uh, why we are learning this, because I think this is a uh, part of our course, as well as you have to, it will be your day-to-day job activity when you will going to join as a pen tester or a security expert of any organizations, right, Mr. Karthik?
yes, correct. True. True. Right. Nowadays, especially in the DevSecOps environment, previously they were looking for administrator people who can implement, CI/CD pipeline and do it. But we are seeing it is constantly evolving, and then nowadays they're looking more into someone with a pen testing experience. I think some of our we have seen a lot of DevSecOps interview, even the after the candidate has cleared, they have told this is the website we want you to try to pen test and check. If you can pen test and the report is find the enough number of vulnerabilities, there's actually a bonus in your salary that is going to be there. So that is how pen testing is growing importance. DevSecOps is no longer, or DevOps is no longer a someone is an administrative perspective. Pen testing is becoming more and more mandatory of that. Right?
So there is a very funny story I would like to share. Last month, two of our consultant, both of they have done the training with us, and when they faced one of our client interview, the client, they did not ask anything. They just simply gave them a website, their internal website, and asked them to get the log and create a report. And after submissions, they, I think they have more or less 80 candidates in throughout the last 6 months they have interviewed, and they have it like a simple staple question: can you please share your report? And luckily, both of those our like candidate, they got those report correct, and they moved to their final round, like HR call, salary discussion. It is not yet finalized, but yeah, they are in the final call. And funny fact is, they don't have any prior knowledge in IT, and the client is good with that, because if they have only one agenda, if you can do their stuff, because US job market is very very good. In good means they always work in binary. You can do it or not. So
Exactly.
if you do, then it's fine. If they don't bother about how, where you have done your courses, where you've done your masters or your undergrad. If you have n number of years of experience, but still you cannot manage this task, you are not eligible. If you don't have the experience, but you have done your homework and you complete the task, then you are good to go. Yeah, sorry for interruption, Mr. Karthik.
Yeah.
Please.
So let me continue with the few more attack vectors from a session perspective. So next one is a very important one, right? And this particular is called as a session fixation. And this is something, right? Because let's assume you are a user who is bit more security aware. You do a lot of things. So meaning whenever you're accessing a browser, you're looking at the link. telling, checking whether the link is valid or not, right? And that you're checking out there and doing a lot of things very right? You don't access over HTTP, you only access over HTTPS, and you're using a safe browser, and you're using a safe system, everything antivirus and everything is going to be there, right? And even your it is going to be managing, right? Even your nowadays antivirus will also check whether a particular website is safe or not, right? If there is an injection problem or excessive attack, it might give out information telling that this page contains something fishy. Are you sure you want to access it, right? So that is how good things are getting out there. But in this situation, how can you go ahead with your process, right? How can hacker will try to get access out of it, right? So one way here is going to be called as a session fixation. Okay. Before we could understand something, let's understand a concept called a very simple one: get request and post request. Okay. These are two things. Whenever I'm sending a request from the browser, something is called as a get request and other is called as a post request. So it is always a bad idea to use get request. Okay. I will show you what is an example here. So I've already logged in here. Let me use something called as an. The reason why it's called a get request is whatever the information is sending out here. Let's say I'm giving this page is very simple. I will give right Karthik and DSO DevSecOps. If I give here, I'm going to get a message called welcome Karthik DSO. It's going to be the meaning. It's just adding welcome and displaying the rest of the message out there. What happens in a get request is, how do you know it is a get request and what happens in that, right? Let me use the same message. Let me intercept. How do you know it's a get request? The request that is being sent by the browser, you can see in the start, it is having a get that is specifying to the server, that is the get request. But whatever the data that is going to be sent by you will always go in the URL, right? See over here, Karthik, and that is going to be sent out there. Okay. This is what happens in a GET request. The problem with this approach is, let's say I'm using a same process for logging my username and password. What is going to happen? If you go to the browser history, right, check out someone's history out there, manage history, you could actually see that in the history, the username and password could be stored. This is a very big problem. We still use get, but we have to be careful where we are doing that part, not like which request is going to be there. So similarly, in a post request, what is going to happen is that, see, this is the same request. Same thing is happening here. It is post. Same thing, Karthik, DSO. Let me intercept the request. Click on go. Can see the post is happening out here. Instead of sending it in the URL, it is sending in the body, right? In the body of the HTML page being sent, it will give out the same data, right? Same welcome Karthik DSO is there. But if you see here, it is not Karthik and DSO is not there. So login pages are supposed to be running with this process out there. But what happens is that in a similar way, sometimes what is going to happen is that some user where the developers where they manage it, what they will do is that they'll put the information in a get request. The session ID is going to be sent every time on every request to someone out there, and that is going to be done by it, right? So now all I have to do is send someone a link like this telling that, hey, check out, this is what is there, right? Check out this web page that is going to be there. So now the problem here is that in session fixation, what happens is that whenever you're sending the username and password to the server sends back a session ID, right? Server sends back a session ID. Who is creating the session ID? The server is doing that session ID out there. Okay. That is what is going to happen. If you remember, when we started something, if there was a session ID already there, that session ID was removed. If that is not happening, what is going to happen now? Right? What happens is one more scenario is that when you connect to the page first time, before you enter username and password, it will send me a login page. Okay, login page. It will send me a login page. In this login page only, a session ID is being sent to the browser or the client out here without authenticating the user. A session ID is sent, but this session ID is not having any permissions. Okay, this session ID is not having any permissions unless until I log in. It's not going to be given any kind of permission. In the next stage, I'm going to assign the username and password, and the same session ID is going to be done. Now it is going to verify the username and password, and if it is 1, then it is going to make the session ID valid. Okay. So when I'm entering the username and password, I'm sending a session here. That is what is happening over there. If it is going in the get request, how it is going to go? It is going to get username equals Karthik, password equals pass, and session ID equals 1234. And both are matching, then the reply back will be 1234 is valid. Please continue, and then rest of the session I'm going to do 1234. This plays a very important role, right? When we're talking about it, authentic giving the session ID, it is going to be very bad at this way, right? What is the problem out here? As an hacker does not, or a malicious hacker user does not always have to be someone, hacker that is going to be there. It could be your friend, your colleague who's trying to compromise you and do all those activities. That is also goes on there, right? In this case, let's assume your colleague is going to send you a link, right? So what he's going to do is that first of all, he is going to connect to the server, and server is going to give him a, sorry, I'm using the wrong one again. He's going to first connect to the server, and server is going to give him a valid session ID, but it is not authenticated, right? Is because the user has not entered anything. So this is the message number 1 and the message number 2, right? That is going to be there out there. So now what this attacker is going to do is that he is going to send the victim telling that, hey, check out this new, link that is going to be available out here. So what now the attacker is going to send this link. The user is clever. He's telling, okay, is he sending me any wrong page? And he'll see that this is a valid page, that is his company website. And it is telling, he got a message telling that check out this, information, new information on the company portal. So now what this user is going to happen is that he is going to open it, right? And he is going to enter the session ID, and then he is also going to enter the username and password. In this case, session ID for 1234. In normal case, what happens is that the one user does not know what is the other user session ID is going to be. In this situation, since this attacker is gaining a session ID from the server and then passing it to the victim and allowing the victim to authenticate that session ID, then once this he has completed the entering username and password, now the attacker is having a valid session ID. Because he has not used it till then. He got the session ID from the server and sent it to the victim. Now the attacker knows what is the session ID well in advance. Because of this, even though everything was taken care, this particular process is going to prevent that from happening out, right? It is going to give the access to that particular user session to the attacker. That is the reason, right? When you saw, when we logged into BWAP, when we log in, there is one session ID, right? Before login, there is one ID, and after login, there is one more ID. to prevent this particular attack only for that, right? Let me show. So let's say when we go to bweb, let's open the machine out here. I'm already logged in here, correct? You can see here, I've logged in as B. So now what is the ID is there given out here? Session ID is going to be 1042. Let me paste it here. Let me click on logout. Click on logout. Fine, you can see there's a login page. Now the same session ID is still present here, correct? 1042 that we already have there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do B bug and press login now. And now if you go check out in the cookie editor, the session ID is changed completely, right? Just to prevent this attack. Just to prevent this attack. When you're checking in the client location, if you see this ID after logging in, logging out, and again logging in, the session ID is same. That means that is going to be vulnerable to session fixation. And this is a very critical bug, right? A lot of things could go wrong here. That is one way of going about it. Second way is brute forcing, right? And one more way is malware, right? If you get virus infected, your virus is going to take care of the session information, grab all your sessions and send it to the hacker. That's going to be there. And one more problem is brute forcing, right? If you see here, when the server is assigning a creating session ID, it has to make sure the session ID is not in sequence. Meaning if I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4 for user 1 and for user 2, it should not be 1, 2, 3, 5, right? And again for user 3, it should not be 1, 2, 3, 6, right? Why is this? What I will do is that let's say user 3 wants to hack user 1. What it will do? It will know that user 1 is already entered. He is having one X as the session ID, which he does not know. But user 3 logs in and he'll get 1236, right? This is his session ID. So now, since it is in a very sequential order, what it thinks is that if I reduce every time one by one, I might get lucky and is going to do that. So one request you will send as 1235. You will see that user that belongs to user 2. Tell no, I'm not interested with that. And I will do to 1234. In second time, he's going to get lucky, right? When you look at websites like Facebook and Instagram, that is where you will see millions of users connecting to that. But a lot of company internal applications and things and all will not have millions of users. Probably they will not even have 100 users also, right? That is the problem. In those situations, having your session ID in a sequence along, it is very difficult. It has to not match at all, right? The session ID should be very long ID. It cannot be small like 1, 2, 3, 4. It should be completely random. It should not be. That is why you see, if you see all the session IDs that was created till now for our machine, see there is no continuation only. It is not something, it is completely entirely different. 70 to 80% should change. That is the minimum requirement on that. And there are changes, there are places where they have tried to pen test the hack the random value generator on the server also, right? In one instance we were able to crack it because what how they're getting is how they're generating the session ID, right? They're using the current timestamp, right, of that thing. That is how they're doing out there. And if you see here, you know, in some cases, right, epoch is that it is going to give the timing in a numerical way. It is not like 10 10 anything. It is going to give the timing in seconds from 1970 Jan 1st or something like that. How many seconds has been there from that time? So they have used that kind of an approach. So here it is constantly changing. This is for every second it is going to keep on intervening, and they use this method for generating their session ID out there, and we were able to compromise almost all. Right, all I have to do is that I have to log in now, get the session ID, and couple of seconds if I keep on going up and down, that's going to be there. They add a few more things into that phrase. That's it, nothing else. We were able to compromise that. Those are the things that you need to take into consideration when you're doing brute force, right? The session token should expire after a very short span of time. Session ID should never be sent in the URL like this, right? So I'll show you. Wait, I think I missed somewhere. Yes, session management. You can see here the session ID is getting sent in the URL. This should not happen. It should always be sent in the HTML body itself, always sent over an encrypted communication, right? Because if you don't do that, you can capture the session ID and then take care of the process. And those are the things that we need to take care, right? So those how is going to process out there. Session is a very important subject. Uh, we have seen, right, a big, whenever we pen test large applications, it is not something we have to do it in a much more careful way, because there are a lot of situations where we have seen where we have pen tested and got access to admin privileges because the way the manage session was not done properly. There are a lot of other things apart from session cookie here. Yeah, session can still be compromised in a many different ways. Probably, maybe a few sessions later we can try to look into that as well sometime. So that is how it was, right? And hopeful, unfortunately, we just had time for session today. Probably we'll talk about SSH on a later stage. Yeah. So any questions on session management till now? Any questions? So how many of you found it interesting, this particular topic? Thanks, man. Thanks a lot.
I personally feel this is really, really, very, very interesting. But
Yes.
guys, you also should, unmute yourself because,
So these are the
and
one of the topics actually we do it regularly on the main course, right? One of the key topics that we do, and we go much more in depth into a lot of other things that is happening out here in the web service perspective, right? So it is very interesting topics that you can cover.
if you like, dislike, share your thought, or if you have any question, also please share your thought because you just need to understand this weekend session is as it is free, so we can all have a audacity to only show that tip of the icebergs. The whole thing you can learn through our main courses, but yes, for knowing the basic elements, you can learn through our free courses as well. Okay. I don't think they have any question. So then we are going to wrap up for today's call for cybersecurity. And after 8 minutes, we are going to start our DevOps session. Thank you, Mr. Karthik. And for those who wants to enroll for our cybersecurity 6 weeks long, Monday to Friday, 5 days in a week, 2 hours classes, feel free to reach us out because once this batch is going to start, the next batch is going to start in I think November end. So don't let slip this chance.